Hello. So this is my book War and Peace that I just completed. I read books in blocks of seven, and this year I read a lot of big books. I've read Don Quixote. I read Crime and Punishment. I read Anna Karenina. Um, I read The Count of Monte Cristo and War and Peace. So this book is almost 1,000 pages. The font is very small, but I love this book. It was great. I remember as a kid in the 10th grade, I think, at high school, someone had picked a required reading, not a required reading, but they had to pick a book to read in class. And they picked War and Peace. And everybody was looking at him like, are you crazy? This book is mega thick and it's going to take you forever. And you might not even finish the whole year, much less than a quarter. But the person trudged on. And I was kind of perplexed. I thought, why would anybody read a book that big? But now that I'm older and I've read a lot of books, I thought this is something I need to come back to because it's renowned and has a lot of good information, historical information in it. I liked it much more than the same author. Tolstoy also wrote Anna Karenina. I did not like that book, but this book is outstanding. Probably more for a man than a woman because it discusses Napoleon's invasion of Russia, and I won't go into detail about the historical nature of it because if you don't know what happens, you'll want to read it and find out. And there's also some historical anecdotes that are in here as well that you could read after reading the book that kind of give you more background. So I want to tell you what happened there. But the interesting thing about this book is as I was reading it, day by day, and then also reading Crime and Punishment, which is another famous Russian author, it struck me how that book was considered awesome also, but I hated it. Crime and Punishment, I hated it. And I looked up why is that book so bad when it's supposed to be renowned and this one is so good. And the first thing that I say is because that book is a psychology book where it goes into depth of a person's thought processes, and the person is all messed up in that book. So it's like looking into the mind of a crazy person, and it wasn't pleasant at all. It was very dark and depressing. This is sociology. So sociology is the basically the watching of people and how they interact. So you won't be hearing the inner thoughts of a person. You'll be seeing that this person did this and this person did that. And like I was describing to my family, if you ask somebody that just went to Disneyland, how was your trip to Disneyland? They might say something like, oh, it was good. We rode 5 rides. The lines weren't that long, and we were there for 3 hours or 4 hours, and felt like we did a lot of cool things. And that would be the summary. Well, in this book, if that was what he was writing about, it would be something like this: standing on Main Street, the child was holding the dripping strawberry ice cream cone. It ran down the child's arm and eventually onto her father's leg. And he noticed it as well and started to, get some napkins to wipe it up. And as he's doing this, he looks across and sees a parade member getting in their cast gear behind the gate that's partially in view. So I'm making up some stupid scenario, obviously, but that's the way that this is written. So it's in sections where it goes back and forth between the elite life, just their everyday life while a war is going on, and then jumping over to the people involved in the war. And it's a great contrast. It keeps going back and forth. And I read a lot of, it was just super interesting. The war sections were more interesting to me because they were based on history. And the other ones were kind of based on history, but more theorized. The interactions between these nobles or whatever they would call them that were in the Russian aristocracy. So I'm going to read you a couple of quotes that I really dug. This is about Napoleon towards the end. So it says, and some years pass during which he plays a pitiful comedy to himself in solitude on his island, justifying his actions by intrigues and lies when the justification is no longer needed. and displaying to the whole world what it was that people had mistaken for strength. So it sounds a familiar thing now. I'm not going to go into too much detail and make it political, but you know who I'm referring to. Somebody on their island that commits regular lies to justify past um, actions that were inappropriate, and still tries to convince you that they have some extra knowledge or reason to be in power that the average person doesn't have or somebody else doesn't have. And basically, they're a big bag of air. And this book makes the case that people that are viewed as magnanimous, as important and wisdom, wise and powerful, like Napoleon, that they basically just survive on chance, and that a lot of these types of things that they accomplish are dumb luck, and that the world just kind of happens the way it wants to unfold. And even though there's a lot of cast of characters and soldiers and generals involved, there's really no rhyme or reason to what happens. It just kind of happens. So that part was real interesting. The other part that was interesting to me is there was a segment about what men want. And you probably look up a lot of places where it says what men want, and all men are different. And I'm not trying to stereotype anybody, but I think in general, men like to be listened to. So it was talking about Pierre, where he'd come back and was talking to Natasha. Now that he was telling it all to Natasha, he experienced that pleasure which a man has when women listen to him. Not clever women who, when listening, either try to remember what they hear to enrich their minds, and when opportunity offers to retell it, or who wish to adapt it to some thought of their own and promptly contribute their own clever comments prepared in their own little mental workshop, but the pleasure real women give, who are gifted with the capacity to select and absorb the very best a man shows of himself. Natasha, without knowing it, was all attention. She did not lose a word, no single quiver in Pierre's voice, no look, no twitch of a muscle in his face, or a single gesture. She caught the unfinished word in its flight and took it straight into her open heart, divining the secret meaning of all Pierre's mental travail. So then basically, they fell in love with each other because he felt listened to. And in our society, especially when it comes to marriage, it seems like listening is optional because you have an escape route and people can pull the plug and easily go on to another situation, and they don't have much consequence to their action. But going into a severe relationship like a marriage, you can't really think of an exit strategy at the beginning. You should be all in. And if you really, really want to make it work with the dude, you need to listen, because it is severely frustrating for a man to go to work and his other partners have to discuss problems they need to fix all the time, and they listen to each other and they get things fixed, and then they come home and they feel like they're never listened to. I just saw an article yesterday, and the guy was writing about his marriage and he was trying to solve his problem with his spouse, and it mentioned how after 10 or 15 years of working that his wife didn't even know what he did for a living. No, that's clear that she wasn't listening and didn't want to know what he was doing for a living. So hard to make a deep connection with a person when you're not even interested what they're doing. And this book kind of alludes to that. So um, there's a lot of good things you can learn from this book besides those two little pieces. And I don't want to spill too much, but I love this book. War and Peace is great. And if I had to compare it to Don Quixote, which is also just epic and very long book, long read, but great information in there. Don Quixote was probably more fun, well, was more fun because some of it was theater of the absurd, but this is very thought provoking. Whether this book is better than Don Quixote, I probably doubt it, but it's pretty close. pretty close to as good as Don Quixote. And I like that book, Don Quixote, probably more than a female would. It's more of a male's book, I think. Put your comments in there. Do you like Don Quixote and War and Peace? If you're female and you've read them, what do you think of them? Uh, I saw a review of Anna Karenina where the woman basically hated it and said that Tolstoy was a narcissist. And he does have that kind of vibe at the end of this book. He has a couple of appendices where he kind of goes into a philosophic angle and tries to prove points and rambles on a lot. And I'm not saying don't read those appendices, you should. If they're epilogues, actually, there's two of them. The first one was especially good. The second one was really draggy and basically trying to drive his point into the ground, and was a lot of it unnecessary. But all in all, great book. Before, well, make it a bucket list. I was going to say it that way. This is something everybody should read if they can handle a story about war. All right, that's my take. Bye.